The Quebec government, once again, trying to stick its nose, perhaps some might argue, where it should not be. And this to do with streaming services. Just a couple of apps here that you might recognize. You ever heard of Netflix or YouTube? Well, they're sort of in the crosshairs right now of a new design here, a new plan, which basically seeks to promote, in the government's words, cultural sovereignty here in Quebec. What do they want to do? They would like to have their content, Netflix and YouTube, right, actually defaulting to French for cultural content in the digital environment. And what they would do is, for video and audio content, it would be automatically in French. That's what come up, and it would require smart TVs to spotlight French programming, and fines, because there's always fines, up to $300,000. By the way, both Netflix and YouTube have reacted to this, saying no. And, you got to consider these are multi-billion-dollar companies. Is it just easier? Would it be to simply say, if that's what you want us to do in Quebec, see you later? Well, let's try to find out. Graham Davies is CEO of the Digital Media Association, which represents music streaming platforms. He's on the line. Mr. Davies, thanks for being here this afternoon. So let me get your reaction, first of all, to this announcement by Quebec that this is what they would like to see. What do you think?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. I think that if the objective is one of protecting and promoting Quebec artistry, then we're supportive of that objective. In terms of the current situation, music streaming services have invested heavily in Quebec and Canada over the past decade, with the majority of their revenues going to artists and rights holders, and that's fixed the broken music industry. It's not that long ago that we had Napster, and the consumer was accessing music for free. So, in terms of the objectives, what we see is that artists from Quebec want access to a global market. The streaming consumer loves their music streaming services, and they want access to music from around the world and from Quebec as well. The music industry wants sustainable revenues that our members are providing, and our understanding is that the Quebec government wants the streaming services to deliver on these objectives, and we are. So I think that, from our perspective, we're keen to engage with the government to help them understand that this really is a successful model right now. That's working for everybody. Music from Quebec is doing incredibly well. We're coming up next month to Patrick Watson becoming the first Francophone artist to join Spotify's Global Billions Club. Lots of other Francophone artists are having great success both in Quebec, in Canada, and in other countries. So, to the point that you're kind of making, we do have some concerns about interfering with the consumer experience, are keen to kind of explain how there could be unintended consequences from that.
So with respect to what I said off the top, Mr. Davies, this idea that both Netflix and YouTube, which are giant, companies, simply look, to a place like Quebec that has roughly 8 million people here, right, and say, you know what, this is just, you're kind of a flea here that we can just, flick off. This is not interesting for us. We're not interested in having to comply with these directives, and pick up and leave. Is there some validity to that?
Well, I think that, I can't speak for them because they're on the audiovisual side and I'm here on the music side. But what I can do is kind of talk to our members, which includes, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, in that we really do need to kind of get into the detail with the Quebec government here in terms of what it is they're trying to achieve and how they want to go about it. Because, there's an economic model here. As I say, our members are paying in the majority of the money that they collect already into the music industry. So the margins are not great. And if there are obligations which are going to put pressure on that, then that's going to put pressure on the whole model, including to the consumer. And then there's also aspects which actually, there are millions of recordings uploaded globally to our members' platforms every year. And so any of these kinds of objectives which seek to promote or provide advantages for music from Quebec, there are some actual sort of real technical issues as to whether it's achievable from the supply chain. So there's a lot to go through here. But you're right that our members, along with other members, like Netflix, etc., will all be sort of considering what the cost of operating their services is in Quebec.
Yeah, when you talk about why Quebec would do this, I'm reading from the actual story. The measures they say are, quote, essential for the future of our culture and our language, particularly among youth. That's from Quebec's own culture minister. Now, I just want to get to one point here. I think when we see stories like this, we tend to think this content is not available. The content, as you point out, is available. It's there.
It is available.
It's findable.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be good enough.
Well, you're absolutely right, and we survey what consumers think, and consumers are super important here, right? They're the ones which are funding the culture and the music industry, and the feedback that we're getting from consumers, and particularly young consumers, is they absolutely want access to music from Quebec as well as music from across the world, and they have access, and our members are promoting music from Quebec through various schemes and playlists and promotions. And as far as we can see, there's absolutely no impediment to any music from across Quebec having access to a global market and consumers finding it and enjoying it. And we're saying, I'm here to say that music from Quebec is doing really well, and that's both, in Quebec but also outside.
Are you aware of any other jurisdictions where this has even come up?
No, I mean, we sort of are able, our members are global, and so this model that I'm talking about, the current model that's working, is the model that applies around the world. And in what Quebec is looking to do, and there is similar activity on the federal level with the Online Streaming Act. These are areas where Canada and Quebec are really sort of going out away from the model that's established across the world. So, that does create concerns for us.
All right. I don't know how far this goes. It's one thing for a province because, these sorts of things have come up before. This idea about, having French be predominant, et cetera. We have it on websites necessarily in this province. I would ask you where you think this does go. As I said, I know there's pushback and from both, in your case, YouTube, but Netflix as well. Yep. Where do you see this playing out? I mean, I know you want to say we have to sit down and discuss this. Where does it go from there?
Yeah, so I think that, we're at somewhat at the start of the process, really. So, in terms of where it goes, we have appreciated the dialogue we've had with the Quebec government already. So, in terms of where we see it going is for us to develop that language. To be completely honest, I think that often people don't understand how music streaming and the economics of that and who benefits from it are different from other models. So we're keen to and hopeful that actually through the dialogue, we can explain how we're supporting the objectives of this legislation, but let's do that in a way that actually builds on the current success and grows it. So, I'm very much always the optimist. So we're going very much into this, trying to be as positive as possible, but with, you are right to kind of flag the concerns that we have.
We will leave it at that. I thank you so much for your time, Mr. Davies. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks so much.
All right. Look, again, so they are negotiating, they're talking, but the most interesting takeaway from that is there is not a single other jurisdiction anywhere served by these companies, by Netflix, by YouTube, that has asked for anything similar to this. Only in Quebec.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Brian Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
or the free iHeartRadio app.